Good morning, everyone. I'm Janelle Dickey. I am the Manager of Enterprise Architecture at the Department of Motor Vehicles. And I'd like to introduce you to our cybersecurity presentation today. Cybersecurity is a vast threat landscape. Developing a comprehensive framework is very, very important. So for us, he's saying I have to use the microphone. Excuse me. Okay. Okay. So for us in the state of California and in government, it's important that we protect our identity of the citizens that we represent. And that's a big job for us. So today I would like to introduce Gary Osland. He's from Cisco. He's the Business Development Manager. He's focused on U.S. public security sector for cybersecurity. He brings cybersecurity solutions to market and identifies and develops new cyber-based innovations for federal and state government entities. Gary's responsible for promoting Cisco's thought leadership within cybersecurity and IT communities. His past roles include systems engineering, aerospace engineering, and strategic account management. He's been in IT for over 22 years and works in the defense industry as well. And what he also has is he works part-time as the cyber operations officer for the Air National Guard, overseeing 132 of our National Guard. So I'd like to introduce Gary Oslin.
Well, it's good to be in sunny California. I love the weather out here. I'm from Florida, and you know, some of my coworkers and I ate outside the other night, and we get like 13 days a year we get to eat outside in Florida because of the humidity and everything. So welcome. Happy Cybersecurity Awareness Month this October. It's good timing. As Janelle was going over 22 years, that's been a long time for me. Kind of a funny story, when I started in IT, I had just gotten out of the military, and the first job I found in IT was running a shovel for a fiber optic trenching company. So I'm on the job about 2 months, and I have a lot of technical training, and I'm down in the trench, I'm about chest deep, and I'm digging, and the owner of the company comes and says, "Hey Gary, how's it going?" I said, "Sir, I have skill sets that go far beyond the shovel, and I'd like a chance to do something else." And he laughed, he pulled me out of the trench, brought me over to the engineering department, and the rest is history. That was about 22 years ago. So I didn't really start at the ground level of IT. I started about 4 feet under the ground level of IT. So today we're going to talk about cybersecurity, about how we can have an integrated strategy for cybersecurity. Move that over. I'm sorry, you're not catching me. Say what?
Would you like more power?
We're probably okay here. You got it in the back there? Is it fine? Yeah. I'll try to stay put. I move around a little bit. So we're really looking, you know, we try to come up with a strategy because cybersecurity is confusing. So we want to try to break it down into, you know, framework of defend, discover, and remediate. So everybody on the next slide, tell me if this is your idea of cybersecurity. It's a bit overwhelming, isn't it? Because if you're a CISO or you're in management, or even if you're a technical person in security, this is probably what you're getting from your bosses, right? Hey, we're going to lose revenue if we get hacked. They're stealing money. More importantly, PII. You know, we're losing personal identifiable information. We don't want to be embarrassed. Espionage, if you're a defense contractor in the defense industry. You have to worry about folks like Anonymous. You have to worry about malware. SAM 8500 for the state. Am I in compliance? What can I do to make sure that I'm still on track? So with that being said, what I want to do is talk a little bit about the current landscape, and then after the landscape where we see where we are in cybersecurity, then I'd like to kind of break it down into that framework I talked about: defend, discover, remediate. So current landscape. I'll let that build out. I should have not done a build. So we're a mobile workforce, right? Mobility's everywhere. I would guess everybody in here has heard of BYOD and have people asking, why can't I use this device on the network? Is that true? Most people, yeah. So we're becoming a mobile workforce. We're connecting to not only a cloud somewhere, maybe a state cloud, we're connecting to many clouds, and the threat doesn't care. The threat's the threat. It's going to be a part of our lives from here till forever. So we have to look at more of a customer-centric, or the customer-centric market dynamics, those dynamics that work anywhere, do anything. We need to think of a new way to secure or have a secure architecture in order to kind of do the end-to-end piece. So along with that change in the way we do business, the mobility aspect, the cloud, and the threats, our data centers are also changing. You know, it wasn't long ago, and hopefully you guys can see that. If you guys can't see those slides or can't read anything, stop me and we'll move around, or I'll kind of shake it up a little bit. So we started with you know, our physical data centers, and then we moved to a virtual data center, and now we're doing things based on cloud. But all of us still here have physical servers in your data center, don't you? And you all have virtual servers in your data center, and you're probably hitting some cloud apps too, right? So we're seeing this multi-connectivity issue, and you know, we're confused. We have these hybrid systems. You've heard of hybrid clouds? Well, it's more than that, because you're, like I say, we still have physical servers. So we need to really look at our security policies and our postures, and we have to prepare for tomorrow, but we have to remember we're still in business today, and we still have those physical servers. So it's not kind of a one-size-fits-all anymore. We have to have multiple aspects and multiple ways to secure our data centers. And I just want to make the point, it's not really about securing your network anymore. It's more about securing your business operations. You want to secure your business operations from destruction, disruption, or theft. So before, you know, we were always talking about secure the network, secure the network. It's now securing your business, because they're hitting you from everywhere. It's not just the network anymore. So of course, within the cloud, the multi-tenancy design. And besides the data center transition, we've also seen an application explosion, right? I mean, how many apps? There's millions of apps, all designed to help you do business, but are they secure? We don't know. We have to start looking at that. We need to make sure that your folks are using the right apps, or the right people are using the right apps in the right way to be secure. So these are kind of the mega trends of what we're seeing, the data center revolution, the application explosion, and those trends have created us any problem. So we have all these apps on the one side, we have these clouds and physical and virtual data centers on the other, and we have got to be able to connect together. You know, like I said, talked about the endpoint proliferation. There's tons of them. Our personal lives are not our personal lives anymore. How many people check their email the first thing they got up this morning? Probably in bed. Nightstand? Yes. So we don't have work life anymore. We don't really have personal life. There's that blending of work and personal. So that's even more important for security then, because who knows where your phone is? I mean, everything's merging together. We're accessing our assets through multiple ways now, multiple medians. You know, VPN from home, always on VPN, Starbucks, in the office, out of the office. So we've got to think about how do we secure that, and that's the problem, isn't it? It is really truly an any-to-any problem. And of course, our services are residing on many clouds now. How many people connect to more than one cloud app on different clouds, like Amazon Web, any of those? Or do you guys, since your state agencies typically only connect to one place? If you're only connecting to one, I guarantee it'll change. So today, on the any-to-any problem, and we're going to talk about this. So this is where we are now, and by the end of the deck, I'm going to talk about where we need to go. So right now, you know, we have just a typical, this is how most people connect, right? You connect up, you hit an edge to your data center, you go through your data center, you hit an edge on the outside, you hit your service provider, and then usually maybe a cloud gateway or cloud security gateway, and then out to your clouds. The problem with that is there's multiple paradigms, multiple identity stores, inconsistent enforcement of policies. It's overwhelming. There's all these pieces put together. So that's what we're here to help you with. We're going to try to get to the point where we're more managed, single panes of glass management, integrated approaches to cybersecurity. So one more piece on the threat landscape is the threat evolution. So we have our threats and our enterprise response. You know, about 2000 we had worms, right? And we used antivirus. But okay, we got that taken care of. Then about 2005, spyware rootkits. We said now we need IDS, IPS. A couple years ago, we had to start using reputation and sandboxing because APTs and cyberware were out there. Things like Stuxnet. Although we saw Stuxnet in 2010, it was really developed in about 2005 or 2006. So we're probably about 6 years behind the bad guys. They're ahead of us. Because what we were seeing in 2010 was developed several years before that. And tomorrow is today. You know, we're looking at intelligence and analytics for cloud. There's this huge attack surface. And I know yesterday, who all was at the keynote yesterday? Yeah, so we talked about the Maginot line, right? So I'll have to slightly disagree with the distinguished speaker yesterday. I don't necessarily think of the Maginot line. You know, that is one common enemy, Germany, trying to come into France. So they saw this line, I'm going to go over. Well, we still have to worry about worms, right? They're still out there. We still have to worry about spyware. We still have to worry about APTs, and we still have the increased attack surface. So it's more of a stack. We can't jump ahead. You know, the cybersecurity is asymmetrical warfare. One person can do massive amounts of damage, right? So if we stop the big guys, the nation states, the North Korea, the China, we still got the teenagers, we still got the disgruntled workers, we've got all those people still hitting us. So we really need to think of the technology through the years is we still need to stack it up. We can't give away one to go with another one. So we got to keep that mindset, not a hey, that's old, let's stop using it. Well, there's still people out there trying to attack you. Any questions on the stacking of threats? Yes, sir.
But isn't it built in as you're going forward? And you never leave anything behind. It's just an expansion, so you have. So you're protecting stuff from yesterday's.
Yes, you still have to protect yesterday. If I would have been the French, I would have put anti-aircraft artillery on top of those huts on the Maginot line. You know, and that would have stopped the aircraft from coming over. You got to keep building. You can't wholesale say that's old. So you have to keep that in mind, and you want to protect your investment. If you've already invested in cybersecurity and security devices for the perimeter, you don't want to throw those away. You want to keep those up and running because there's still somebody who will want to come through that way.
I think what he made the point was we're looking in the future to catch up with those guys. But what they're looking at is, okay, we still got all the old stuff, the dial-up modems and all those vulnerabilities that somebody may go after and get in that way. Because we're always trying to play catch up to them and get ahead of them. They're back here, we're already out here, but let's go back and see what they left behind for us to get in.
Yep. So
I think that's the point you were trying to make.
Yes. Yep. So that has to stay. So moving on with the landscape, let's look at how we're doing right now as a whole for cyber threat detection and response. How are we doing? About half the threats on our networks are found by external parties. That could be law enforcement popping open the trunk of a car and finding 1,000 credit cards, all with names of state employees on it, meaning your PII was hacked. It could be fraud detection organizations saying, hey, we're seeing abnormal behavior. Internally, when half the time we do find it through passive methods. It's employees complaining about slow networks. Or my email opened up and just sent 6 emails and I didn't do anything. So we're finding a small amount ourselves, us as IT folks, us as an industry are doing kind of a poor job at finding the threats ourselves, and we need to find ways to do better. The response, so Mandiant has in their writing, and that's actually backed up by the Secret Service and DHS, the average advanced persistent threat from a nation state can set on your network for about 416 days. That's written, actually that number, if you talk to Mandiant folks, that number's come down into the 300 range. About 300 days these threats can set on your network undetected. Kind of scary stuff, so we got to find ways to find them. That's part of that discover piece we talked about as we go through this. You kind of keep in mind that discover, defend, discover, remediate piece, that's part of that framework. We've got to find that, we've got to do a better job. The GAO came up with those statistics, about 60% of people think they're hacked. I have a feeling that's closer to 100% now. We'll have to give the federal government shut down. I'll knock on the GAO a little bit. I think those are old statistics. I think we're probably much closer to 100%. Can we do a quick show of hands? How many people here think that there's probably a threat on your network now? Yeah. I mean, it's common knowledge now. So, so our government probably needs to catch up with some of this. So what's it costing us? What's it going to cost the state? We lose about $1 trillion a year in private sector revenue loss from espionage. That hits our defense contractors. Our defense contractors spend billions of dollars, say, to design a new aircraft. And then they design it and they get it out there, and then a year later China shows up with an aircraft that looks exactly the same. So they've stolen that. So it's really hard to put a number on that. But the government's tried to put a number on it, the House Intelligence Committee, saying about $1 trillion a year of lost revenue from espionage, lost intellectual property, intellectual capital. Here in the US, we lose about $100 billion a year in cybercrime. That's the credit card fraud, stealing your money. Interestingly enough, only about $1 billion is actually cyber bank robberies. So that tells us it's not hitting the banks, it's hitting us personally in this room. And I put that one stat up there about actual physical bank robberies, only 43 million a year. The interesting thing is, and that's what 0.5% of all the bank robberies are actually gun and mask bad guys robbing banks. But you sure see it on the news, right? Every time somebody robs a bank in California, I guarantee it's on your local station, isn't it? If it was in your local area. And there's police cars, and there's SWAT teams, and there's guys going away in handcuffs. But how many of you have heard about any cyber bank robberies in the state of California? You haven't. That's kind of scary. That it's almost like a hidden thing. We need to find ways to make our law enforcement or whomever, they need to start telling us when this is happening, because I think that American people, or all of us in this room, probably you're lulled into the state of security because you don't know it. And when you go in a bank or when you go to an ATM, right, you're looking behind your shoulder and you're hiding your pin in. Well, the bad guy already stole all your money 6 months ago, just on a keyboard in a basement or in a different country. So we have to kind of change the way we think. So I want to talk about South Carolina for a second. If you guys can't see, or actually let me go back to the cost of the state. So in the past, we never really knew how much a breach would cost the state. You know, the price per record stolen, I'd heard $4, I'd heard $15, I'd heard $24, there was all these numbers. Well, then the state of South Carolina got hacked. And thank goodness for those guys. I feel terrible they got hacked, but they have been so open about the hack. They called in Mandiant. They allowed Mandiant to produce a report from the hack. And it's done more to help states, state and local government, protect their networks, because now we know how much it costs. Now we know exactly how they're getting in. And like I say, I'm very happy that they shared it. Sometimes I feel a little bit bad about picking on them a little bit, but it's good for all of us that they shared it. So they lost about 3.8 million records. They had to spend about $20 million just to notify and do credit checks for their citizens whose identities were stolen. That's a little under $5 a record, or $4 a record, excuse me. So then they had to spend another $25 million just to remediate it. They had to pay Mandiant. They had to do some remediation, and they're not done yet. So we're up to about $11 and $11.84 a record to notify and remediate, and they're not done yet. They still have the problem with a lot of people in South Carolina are wary now of filing taxes online, so they're going back to paper. And that's going to be a cost that could last them for years. So if you look at those known numbers, which I think are conservative, I think they're going to end up being more. So let's round that to about $12 a record. You know, how many people in the state of California? More than 3.8 million. And, you know, if you look at the DMV here, how many driver's license records are there? Past and present. Because when people move out, they still move out of state, right? Their records are still there. So would 10 million, 20 million, 30 million be a good number? So, you know, $111 million if you only have 10 million records stolen. Does the state of California have $110 million? No, we don't. It's a lot cheaper to try to do something ahead of time to try to remediate afterwards. So anyway, I like to thank South Carolina for that. And the confidence lost in your agencies are part of that embarrassment. You remember the bubble graph at first, embarrassment was up there? You don't want to be embarrassed either. So let's talk about current breaches for a second. And I'm going to give you a fair warning. California's on here. This is Dark Reading compiled this. And I don't know if you guys ever go to the Dark Reading website, great website for cybersecurity information. Dark Reading compiled a list of the top 10 breaches of 2012. But before I go into that, I want to kind of do a level set. I know we have a mixed audience here. We have managers, we have technical people, we have people trying to learn. So I kind of want to go over, just before we go into this, so you can kind of keep this in mind when we're talking about breaches. A nice level set is, how does malware work? Well, first there's the initial infection vector. That's how the malware gets into your network, right? That's done typically through hacking, email, the web, flash media, plugins, whatever. So that's how it gets into your network. Those are the common ways. Once it's in your network, if it's a bot or something, it needs to receive instructions. It does that through web, P2P, or very commonly with bots, DNS. So it sends out, gets instructions back, now it's on your network and it knows what to do. Then it's got to spread throughout your network. User interaction is a very common way to spread malware on your system. I like to use the thing because somebody told me this happened to them, so I laugh about it, but it's Bob getting an email, and he clicks on a link and his computer slows down. So he sends that email to Jim and says, hey Jim, can you click on this link and see if your email slows down like mine did? That's funny, but it happens, hopefully it doesn't happen that much anymore, but things like that happen. So we have to watch that user interaction piece. And at the very end, for the user piece, I'm going to talk a little bit about human firewalls. We all should be a firewall for our system in the state. So we'll talk a little bit about the human firewall. And then the hard part is, once it gets on your network, the persistent piece, the persistent mechanism, it's going to hide in registry, kernel rootkits. It's going to hide on device drivers, memory now. They're finding malware hiding in memory. How do you find it in something that's ever changing, constantly changing, never the same? Really hard to find any type of anomalous behavior in memory, right? It's almost impossible. So that's how typical malware or threats work. So here we go. You guys are going to have a hard time seeing this, so I'll kind of read some of them off. We talked about South Carolina, right? 3.8 million tax records. It was a phishing attack. And we'll talk about phishing. Yesterday during the keynote, we talked a lot about phishing, right? Spear phishing. So the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about phishing. But we talked about South Carolina enough. Let's talk about number 2 from dark reading, California Department of Social Services. 700,000 people's payroll information was lost in the mail en route between IT contractors and the Department of Social Services. Is anybody from Social Services here? No? Good, that means no stones will be thrown. No throw it at me. Number 3, Utah, 780,000 records. Eastern European hack had taken advantage of configuration issues during a database migration. That's definitely a human error there. That could have been prevented. Let's go back to California, number 4, child support services. Sensitive health and financial records, 800,000 of them lost in a FedEx shipment. Now, I'm not a Californian, I'm an outsider, but when I look at the list and I see that 1.5 million records have been stolen from California, both in lost shipments, either mail or FedEx, that seems like there's a correlation there. I personally would be calling the CBI and saying, get old Patrick Jane on the case. If you watch The Mentalist, and say, well, there seems like there should be a correlation here. How does, out of all the hacks, the top 10 hacks, top 10 breaches in the whole country, 2 are California, and both involve lost or stolen shipments of PII. Anyway, is anybody looking into it? Or, yes?
When that happens, like child support?
I do not know the exact date. I could get that for you. But if you go to dark reading, they got this list, and it's more way in depth. I just couldn't fit their whole 15-page article on the slide deck. So breaches aren't just, and we'll talk about that in a second too. Breaches aren't just bad guys from Eastern Europe hacking into your network. I have a feeling those 2 are connected. Just as an outsider. Anybody disagree or agree? You think the 2 shipments 1 year? 1.5 million records? No? Okay. Okay, so we won't talk about justice statistics. Most of these are actually state and local governments, as you can see, most of the big breaches. One I want to bring up is the city of Springfield, Missouri. They said, hey, we were breached, 2,100 records were stolen. This goes back to South Carolina being honest. They weren't necessarily honest, Springfield. Anonymous came back and said, what, 2,100? Geez, we got 1,000 vehicle descriptions alone and 280,000 summons. That's 281,000 records in my book. So Springfield tried to kind of cover up. They weren't being as honest as they could be. And look what happens. Then they're embarrassed. Because that's what Anonymous wants, right? They mainly want to embarrass you. So my notes to you is if you were to get hacked or breached, unless it's sensitive information, it just can't be released. I'd try to be as honest and open as possible. Because if it was anonymous or it was some other bad guy that wants to embarrass you, they'll definitely embarrass you. Wisconsin Department of Revenue, we won't talk about that. I did want to talk about New Hampshire for a second. That was a human error thing. They found prisoners were accessing the offender database, the management database system, which could parole people. For some reason, they thought it was a good idea to give access, internet access to inmates, which is fine, libraries, but don't have the systems connected together. They were on the same networks. They're allowing prisoners on the exact same networks as the management database for the prison system. So the prisoners, of course, hacked in. Now, they don't know, or they're not willing to say if anybody changed their parole date, but it happens. So that's kind of the top 10 breaches. I wanted to share that with you. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about phishing. So this is interesting, and I'm glad the keynote brought up phishing yesterday and spear phishing. So our friends at Verizon, they have excellent breach reports, if you want to go out and read them. Verizon had come to the conclusion that about 95% of all attacks tied to nation states were a result of phishing. So Verizon does this test. Anybody here work for Verizon? No, they're not in the room. Dang, I give them kudos and they're not here. So Verizon does this big email test. And they say, how many emails does it take in a campaign to get somebody to click on a link? Well, it got kind of scary because they found if they send about 8 emails in a campaign, there's about an 80 to 90% chance someone's going to click on a link. If they just bump that up to 16 emails per campaign, there's a pretty much 100% chance in test after test that one of us is going to click on a link or open an attachment. 16, that's it. So we talked about spear phishing a little bit yesterday, and that's one way to do it. You'd have to send to 16 individual people, and the spear phishing campaigns are much, much larger than 16. So they're getting in your network. I was reading recently about something called communal phishing. Well, that sounds fun. Well, actually, it was sort of done in South Carolina, right? Someone phished via information on Facebook. So what communal phishing does is they say it can really increase the chance of getting in. They send an email to me, my coworker Yvonne, my coworker Gary, maybe one other, but they CC the other workers. I'm going to be a good corporate citizen, right? I don't know who sent me that email. I'm deleting it. I might say, hey, Gary, good time last night. So then I delete it, but I don't know if my coworkers deleted it. They just sent it to 4 people, one person and 3 CCs. So they send another one maybe. And I delete it again. I don't know if they've deleted it because we don't talk every day. So maybe about the 4th email, they send something that says, hey, Gary, that was a great time last night. Here's a pic. Or check out this link of all the pictures from what we did last night. Then my coworkers are interested. What does Gary do at night? You know, click. So communal phishing is actually taking those numbers and compressing down. Yeah, they're sending 16 emails, but they're only sending it to 4 recipients. And they build up this community of trust in the emails, even though you don't know it. And they've found your friends on LinkedIn or on Facebook to send these communal emails to. So they're really finding creative ways to use social media or to leverage social media to get into your networks. So delete's always your friend. Your boss can yell at you for deleting an email. If you didn't think it was from him, they can always resend it. Or they can come and yell at you. But if you click on the wrong email, and you just compromise your whole network. So that's my soapbox for phishing. Okay, so what can we do about a framework? How can we fix those problems? How can we take that bubble map with all your worries and try to build into a framework to help fix your problems? We feel, of course, defend, discover, remediate based on network fabric, but I want to talk about just one second before we get into that. What is cybersecurity? A lot of people think cybersecurity is network security, right? Where most of us live. The 7 layers of the OSI model. Network security and content security, email security, all those pieces. But as we heard yesterday in the keynote, cybersecurity is really a lot more, right? It's about the distribution of the gear to you. Is the vendor you're buying from? Do they have channels, like distribution channels that are secure? Do they have certified secure supply chains, certified through the Department of Homeland Security and the Anti-Terrorism Coalition? Do they have anti-counterfeit technology built in? How do you know? So start looking, talk to your, cybersecurity, we're all IT folks, right? But it takes everybody. Talk to your folks that run contracting or acquisitions. Are they making sure the products you're buying are secure? Are they trusted systems? What about the delivery of those? What about your partners, the contractors that you hire in to do the work, or the resellers of that gear, or the companies themselves? Have they vetted their employees? Do they have security clearances if needed? Are your advanced services secure that you're buying from vendors? That's something, once again, you're contracting folks. So cybersecurity isn't just about us in this room. It's about contracting. It's about you know, all those people that set all those contracts up, and acquisitions, and much more. So I won't talk about the user systems, because we're going to talk about that. That's what we're going to talk about as far as the defend, discover, remediate. But let's talk about our CIOs and our CISOs and our bosses. They're the ones that they kind of fit into that governance piece. Are they following the proper regulations? Are they making sure the folks are following the right regulations? Are they building policies based on standards like NIST? Or are they looking at MSISAC for some of their standards? They're looking at ISO. By the way, if you're using ISO, I strongly suggest using NIST. NIST is concerned about you. ISO is concerned about selling you standards that are global. My personal opinion. I see a couple of head shakes. So NIST has some great standards. And education. Some people have education as part of their standards to build their policies. So California's great education systems use it, and you'll see some of that in the human firewall piece too. So cybersecurity, as you can see, is a lot more than just us in this room, right? We need to be reaching out to other folks to make sure that we can get the big picture of cybersecurity, the whole scope of it, and then we can start working on securing our networks. So defend, discover, remediate. It will work here. So implications for security. When we defend, we have to worry about things like policy and access control, blocking malware, quarantining off users who may not be ready to get on the network or may have a dirty machine, rerouting traffic. When we're discovering, we have to have increased content inspection. We need to know what's going on, look for anomalous behavior internal to your network, because discover is really about internal, right? I mean, you defend on the outside, you set up the moat, but bad guys do get in, we know it. So we have to be able to discover those bad guys within the network. We have to look for those advanced threats and remediate. We need to find the threats, we need to fix it, do forensics so it doesn't happen again. A little bit about secure network. I had that block in the middle. So secure network, my view of secure networks are your route switch, your actual infrastructure. Can it produce things such as NetFlow in order to give information, NetFlow information, or packet information up to something that can read NetFlow? Do you have a way to have an identity services type of engine? Do you know who's on your network, when they're on their network? Application recognition through network-based application recognition or application visibility control. You have to know all these things. Start with a core network. You already have invested. Everybody here is a core network. You've already invested heavily in a core network. Use the attributes of that core network to help make a secure fabric, so you can start adding on to proper security products in order to round out the solution. And of course, NetFlow for your firewalls and cell. So that's part of that secure network fabric we're talking about. So let's go back to the defending part of it. And one of the solutions we like to use, we call a malware detection and defense solution. It is what you typically see as the external, the border of your network, right? It's your firewalls, it's your IPS device, it's your email security appliance, your web security appliance. But you got to take it, you can't just have devices sitting on a network. You've got to be able to feed them information. You've got to be able to grab global threat information from global threat information services and feed into them, and maybe allow them to feed information back, so there's an information share. You hear about information share all the time, and reputation, and how do we do this? There's a couple companies that do it. We do it. Google does it. Google Chrome actually uses reputation from all the other browsers out there, and they feed information back and forth, and that's how they help secure your network, or help secure your endpoint. But as we said earlier, you can't just secure your endpoint, you have to secure your whole network. So think about the edge, and think about the products you already have, and how do you get them to share information? And can you do it globally? Those are questions you have to ask yourself. Then you got to find out how to do it. So I'd love to tell you how to do it. We got a booth full of salespeople to tell you that. Just best be a little bit. So that's our malware detection and defense solution. That's that border piece, defending the borders. You got to still keep the bad guys out. You got to keep the teenagers out. You got to keep the low-level players out. We already know that the nation states are probably going around that. but there's still people trying to hit that. I'm going to skip this because it's going to be too hard to read. It was just about some of the detection. You guys can download this. This will be available on YouTube and download. So you'll be able to download this deck and take a look at this malware detection. It kind of explains out each piece of malware detection, what an IPS does, what a firewall does, cyber threat defense, what that does. So this is a good one to download. Like I say, it's going to be too hard to read here, so I'll bypass it and take a look at the, or stop by our booth and we'll talk about it. So let's talk about secure identity. I think we heard identity yesterday too, and anytime you pop up a web page about cybersecurity, you're going to hear, identity is a new perimeter. Well, not really, but identity is extremely important. But identity isn't what identity used to be. Identity used to be username and password. It's me. But now identity is not only who am I, what application am I going to? And am I allowed to go to that application? Identity is also where are you coming in from? What connection did you use? It also when, what time of day, and how, what device. So if I don't work in finance and I'm coming in, you should be able to set yourself a business relevant policy. You can see the business relevant policies up there that says if you're Gary and you're on an iPhone from Starbucks at 11 o'clock at night, you have absolutely no reason to log into a finance server. No need, or a state-run server. So we can take all those attributes of the new identity and we start tying them to business-related policies. Then we can use like an engine, an identity engine, identity services engine, to be able to push that policy throughout the network, because we already talked about NetFlow and all those attributes that you already own in your network. So it sounds a little bit confusing, but really it's not. If you think of policy, Gary is only allowed to access the finance server if he's on the network or at home in his home office through an always-on VPN between the hours of 8 and 4. That's your policy. Well, you now have the ability to actually take that policy, tie it into an engine, and that engine can look at all the security attributes, look at all those who, what, where, when, why, and how of the new identity, and be able to push that down throughout your network. So we're really talking about identity and mobility, and everybody hears BYOD, right? We talked a little bit about BYOD. I don't think you can have multiple devices without changing your idea of identity. You can't run them together. They got to be together, because this is your new identity. Whatever your device they're on, wherever you're coming in from, it's your new identity. And that's going to be one way to help stop bad guys from getting in your network, because they won't pass all those checkboxes. They'd have to do an awful lot. They'd have to spoof MAC addresses. They'd have to get username and passwords to hack in. Your credentials, when they steal credentials and log in, yes, if you're doing it the old way, they can certainly steal my username and password, my credentials to get in. But if they're not on one of my devices, that's a known device, if they're not coming in where I'm supposed to be coming in from, they're not going to get in. So it kind of takes a whole new level of security, the whole secure identity and mobility piece. So as you're building your networks and you're looking at your framework, consider, please don't use the old identity. Think of new identity. It's much more than username, password. Even a lot of places use third form factor, another form factor of identification, right? They have username, password, and then like our DoD guys here, you have your CAT card that plugs into the network, but that's still not quite enough, because you guys can still log in from elsewhere, right? I mean, I log in with my DoD account from home, and I go to the Air Force portal or wherever I need to go. So we really need to make it more than what it has been. So that's kind of the gist of secure identity and mobility, and why you should consider that as part of your framework for your network. Cyber threat defense. That's our visibility on the inside of the network. You guys already have routers and switches, right? So you're already producing NetFlows. Everybody know what NetFlow is? NetFlow is an industry standard. You can think of NetFlow as like your cell phone bill for packets and information, right? It says when the connection started, who the originator is, who received the packets, how many packets. There's like 7 different pieces to a NetFlow packet, and our SEs in the back are probably shaking their head thinking, oh, those sales guys. But anyway, so that's NetFlow. So you think of NetFlow like a cell phone bill. So if you already know all that information, why not capture that and kind of baseline your network and say, this is normal stuff that happens on your network. So when there's anomalous behavior, something's not quite off, you can capture that And we work with a company, a cybersecurity anomaly detection company called Landcope. They have a StealthWatch product. It's not a Cisco product, but we like them a lot. They're one. There's QRadar, Q1 Labs. There's several of these companies that capture this, but only a few of them can take it that one step farther. They take the information from NetFlow, say there was an anomaly, something bad happened. What some of these guys can do on anomaly detection, they can add context to it. They can tap into your routers with network-based application recognition or application visibility control, and they can say, hey, okay, I seen an anomaly, and it was email. And then you can go one step further. These guys can have hooks into an identity services engine and say, hey, that was Gary on his iPhone coming from Starbucks. So now guess what? That's real time. That's not, I'm not talking SIM here. I'm not talking old files going into something. I'm talking real time, continuous network monitoring through a cybersecurity anomaly detection. We call it cyber threat defense. But it's taking all that information. And can you imagine if you can sit and your IT guys can sit and these systems will email you, they'll text you, but that real time, that how valuable is that to know that there's an anomaly, more than likely a breach, and it was coming through in real time, Gary's iPhone, using email from Starbucks. So to me, that's just invaluable. So that should really be part of your framework. A cyber threat defense piece should be part of your defense, because we know the bad guys are getting in. If we could stop them, we would, right? But they're getting in. They're finding new ways. They're a couple years ahead of us, and they're probably always going to be a couple years ahead of us. So we got to start thinking of new ways to find them. I think anomaly detection is probably one of the key ways. That and securing the identities of people. I'm running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to kind of bypass putting it all together. I'll keep it up there for a second. But anyway, it's just what I talked about. It's about taking identity, the context, who am I? It's taking anomalies on your network that are based on things that you already own. You already own routers and switches, and I guarantee most of them, if they don't produce full net flow, they produce like a sampled net flow. You always want to try to go with unsampled net flow because that's full line rate. Look for devices that have either ASICs or hardware-enabled net flow so you don't bring down your network. So you've already got that, and you can take that and combine it all together with the context and flow and put it to a single pane of glass so your security folks don't go crazy. Now, some people, I was actually at a university in Florida, they weren't so interested in this because they had tons of student interns that would almost in real time monitor logs, SIM logs. They were just going through. I'm like, well, you know what? A lot of people don't have that. You might have 100 computer science students that are willing to do that as part of an internship, but I bet you nobody in this room has 100 interns that they can have sitting there going through logs. If you did, you probably wouldn't be here. Okay, so that's putting it all together. I did want to talk about cloud for a second and how to secure cloud. So when we're looking at the cloud, we have a new place to look for threats, right? Visibility used to be at the edge of the data center, and then all of a sudden we started virtualizing and bringing in clouds. So now our visibility for threats needs to move up into that virtual layer, into the hypervisor layer. So once we get there, then what do? So we got to segment it off, right? So now we have to have visibility. So we have, consider virtual switches. So the virtual switches segment off the traffic, which is good. That's the start, right? But then what do? So then we got the multi-tenants. We got tenant A and tenant B. That's where the virtual firewall comes in. And you need to look at virtual firewalls to be able to firewall traffic off between tenants. But then cloud brings something new and virtualization brings something new at us, right? They say, okay, within the tenants, now we have groups within tenants, VMs within tenants. So now we have to, how do we do this? So now, so then there was the advent of the zone firewall or a virtual security gateway that can actually firewall off individual sections within the tenant. Sounds confusing. It works. A lot of vendors, us included, actually we use our same code on our hardened firewalls that we use on our virtual firewalls and on our virtual security gateways. But you've got to take a whole new look. And some companies, we've taken kind of a different look at it. So you don't want packets to have to learn everything new every single time, right? So we came up with something we call vPath that actually can build a path that says, hey, I know who that is, that's trusted. We're going to send that up the same path, and it'll keep going to the right place, and if something changes, then it kind of recalculates and goes through the whole firewall system again. But when you're looking at cloud, and you're looking out there, and we're state agencies, right? So most of us are going to probably start with a private cloud or a statewide cloud. In your data center, make sure that they're segmenting your traffic. Make sure that they're firewalling off tenants. Make sure they're firewalling off groups within tenants. And make sure they have visibility and all that. and you'll be better off. There's companies that do it, so it's not, this isn't pie in the sky, this isn't new. There are folks that do it. So let's talk about strategic direction a little bit. This is kind of, I'm going to buzz through this because we're really getting close on time. This is kind of what I talked about at first, right? We got to kind of pile on. The bad guys are still trying to get in, so we still need firewalls to protect our networks, our actual core networks. We still need content-aware content application-aware protection for our data centers, and we have the device to the cloud, the any to anything, any device to any cloud. So now we need to be threat-aware on a global level and on a cloud level. So you've got to, I mean, we've got to start thinking outside the box on securing. It's not segmented anymore. We have to have this end-to-end, any-to-any type of architecture that's going to help secure your business process, not your network. Securing a network's easy. You've got to secure your process. You've got to secure your way you do business. So how do we do this integrated approach? We've actually talked about it all. We need to continue with the integrated approach. We had network enforced policy. We need common policy management and context. One policy. You've got to have the ability to take your policy and push it throughout your network. And we need to also include cloud-based threat intel sharing. Where's it coming from? What's the reputation of that bad guy? And hopefully your ISP, your internet service providers, your cloud providers are doing that also, so they can start shutting things off at where they're coming from. They can say the reputation of this sender is horrible. We're going to block it. Being we have our products at the ISP, we're going to block that at the internet service provider. He's not even going to get to us. So we're starting to see, that's what we're starting to see as far as our integrated approach. Cyber threat defense, we talked about that a little bit, right? They're already in anomaly detection, anomalous behavior. That's going to start moving more towards, we're going to improve that through artificial intelligence and checking with anomalies more than just flow-based anomalies. So you'll see more of that in the future, that artificial intelligence, checking for anomalies on more things than just flow and more things than just what's going across your network. So stay tuned, you'll see a lot more of that in the future. I wanted to talk about next generation perimeter, but my slide is probably not good anymore. I'll make a quick announcement if you didn't already hear. This week, Cisco and SourceFire, who's here, merged our teams together to pretty much hopefully change the industry. So we're talking about next-gen firewalls. We're talking about next-gen IPSs. So a lot more. Actually, please visit the SourceFire booth if you can. There's a lot over there. Sorry for the sales pitch. But my slide is not as valid as it was because the whole game just changed. So we already talked about the current state. We talked about taking the current state and network enforcement policy. We just talked about on the last slide, 2 slides ago, common policies. You got to have common policies across your network, whether you're wired, wireless, coming in to a cloud, wherever you come in, you have to have common management policies. And you have to make sure you have the cloud-based intel. You have to know what's going on outside of your little domain. So I wanted to talk about human firewall a little bit. So fixing people is going to be the cheapest way to protect your network. That should be step 1. I really should have this as the first slide, but honing your human firewalls is one of the best ways. When we looked at a list of top 12, the top 10 for 2012, employees that think of themselves as human firewalls or security-aware employees probably could have done more to stop almost all of those. It's our jobs in this room to actually fix the things that the human firewalls can't. But if you're an IT manager, or you're a CIO, or you're in the IT workplace force, in order to be a better human firewall, because we already know security, right? We should know security. We need to start promoting more formal education and training within our organizations. We need to look to people like the SANS Institute for Training, MSISAC. Is everybody familiar with MSISAC, the Multi-State Information Sharing? Outstanding organization. All 50 states are a part of it. A lot of times it kind of falls in the emergency management portion of a state. But if you're an IT director, or you're an IT, or you're in security, and you haven't been to the MSISAC website, I guarantee someone in your state has, because you're a member. California's a member. Go to that website and look. They've got like we have frameworks. They have frameworks to help secure your network. They have all kinds of great stuff out there that you can use to help make your business process more secure. Certifications. I'm a huge fan of certifications. It proves people's knowledge. We at Cisco, I mean, our certifications have kind of become industry standard, right? Most people know what a CCNA. You know that person's a good network person, a CCNP, a CCIE. We have security tracks in each one of those. We also have a new certification that's going to be an industry certification. We're coming out with it very shortly. It's already built. It's a certified cybersecurity analyst position or certification. It's going to be hard to get. There's going to be labs. There's going to be pen testing. There's going to be a whole lot to it, and we're going to do it internally first. We're going to set up our labs. There'll be a lab in San Jose to help people come in and get it. But once we get one step further with it, then we're going to bring it out to like network academies and universities, so you won't have to go to Cisco to get this certification. You'll be able to go to your local universities or Cisco network academies to get this cybersecurity analyst. And that's something that's just going to be invaluable, I think, is to have folks that work for you have the ability. If you know how to hack into a network, you have a lot better idea how to keep somebody out, right? So don't discount education. It's definitely worth it. Train your users. You know, train your users on cyber threats. Does anybody do that? Does anybody have a monthly mailer go out to all the employees in your organization, telling them what the latest threats were, what to watch out for? I'm getting this. Yes? No? Okay, so give them some compromise instructions. I'm going to use a DoD model. So my counterparts in the National Guard, I'm in the National Guard, they're in the National Guard. We all get, the DoD I think does an outstanding job. It used to be a real pain for me every single year to do a computer-based training module just so I can keep my login, right? You guys have to do it too, right? But when you sit back and look at that, it is outstanding training. It really gives you a lot of the information you need. They also have compromise instructions by every PC, and you should do it too. If you, just compromise could be simple, a 3x5 card that says, if your computer's running slow or there's odd behavior in your computer, do this. Unplug the cable. Call IT, call somebody. Give your users instructions on what to do. So in the case of South Carolina, $52 or $50 million isn't spent because of a user clicked on an email and weird stuff started happening on their machine. If they would have had some instructions, maybe they could have not done it. So train your users. You think about the DoD model. You can go and see what they do. Test your systems and test your people. How many managers here? IT managers. Okay, so it could be as easy as taking that 3x5 card and every once in a while, once a month, once a week, walk up to a user and hand them a card that says, your email just sent out 15 emails and you didn't touch your machine. What do? Get your users on board. Run some cybersecurity exercises. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything, and it's cheap. It's as cheap as buying 3x5 cards if you need to, and hand it to your employees to see what their knowledge base is and see how you need to train better. So never forget your human firewalls. They're going to be your key piece to securing your network. And I am out of time. That's a marketing slide. I'm sorry I had to put it up. Any questions? And I'll be at the booth, so I know we have like 2 minutes before we have to leave, but any questions now? And I'll be at the booth for later. Too much? Was it overload?